Today I saw 10 Cloverfield Lane. Did it live up to the hype? Kind of. I mean, maybe it would have lived up to the hype more, but I was kind of even more hyped up to watch it because I found this podcast called Cloverfields, hosted by Steve Zaragoza and Mike Falzone, who you might know from SourceFed. After I watched Cloverfield, like last month or so, and I did a review for that, you can go watch it, I just happened to be looking for new podcasts to listen to, and I saw this one on the HeadGum Podcast Network called Cloverfields, and I recognized Mike and Steve from SourceFed. And I didn't really know what the podcast was going to be about. I thought they just named it Cloverfield just cause whatever. I didn't realize it was actually going to be a podcast about the movie Cloverfield. And they even said it at the beginning of the podcast, and I was like, alright, I guess maybe that's a joke. But no, it really is a podcast about the movie Cloverfield, and subsequently 10 Cloverfield Lane, which hadn't come out when the podcast started. I've only listened to the first episode of this podcast, but it was just so interesting because I had no idea about this whole ARG thing before the movie Cloverfield came out, which they were talking about a lot throughout the podcast. That's largely what it was based around, what they were talking about. Apparently there was like this whole series of videos and blog posts and websites created to tie into the movie Cloverfield as like a little in-universe experience before the movie even came out. And there was already mystery behind the movie before it came out because they decided not to show the monster in any of the trailers or anything, which ended up not being that big of a deal because they just showed him in the movie and it was like nothing. But then apparently this ARG added so much more like mystery and what's going to happen behind it. And it was just so interesting to hear about. I seriously recommend you go check out that podcast if you've seen the movie Cloverfield, which I mean, if you haven't, then while you're watching this review of the sequel, I'll probably definitely be spoiling the first movie, so you should leave if you haven't seen it. I'll also be spoiling 10 Cloverfield Lane later on, but I'll give another spoiler warning for that. But yeah, seriously, I definitely recommend you check out that podcast because it's really interesting stuff if you hadn't heard about that ARG previously. They really go into in-depth detail about all of it. But anyway, after I heard that podcast, I of course was super hyped up to watch the next movie, 10 Cloverfield Lane, even though I was already kind of excited because people were saying it was like a great movie. On the Screen Junkies channel, they picked John Goodman as like one of the best supporting actors of the year in their personal Oscar picks video. So I saw 10 Cloverfield Lane was on Hulu and I was like, yeah, I'll just watch it right now. This is gonna be great. And it was a pretty good movie. The parts people were saying were so good before I listened to the Cloverfields podcast, I think that stuff held up. With that, it was really good. But as a follow-up to Cloverfield-related hype, it was a little disappointing. So actually, I feel like to really get into that, I'll have to spoil this movie. So before I talk about that, I'll just say that the whole story about John Goodman's character in the bunker and everything, that was great. That was a good movie. I probably would have given it a 7.5 out of 10, but I was really unsatisfied with the Cloverfield tie-in, and this is a sequel to Cloverfield, so I knocked it down to a 7 out of 10. So yeah, I would recommend this movie, and you should definitely see the original Cloverfield first, and I'd still recommend listening to the Cloverfields podcast. But when you do watch this movie, don't be too excited for anything tying into the Cloverfield franchise, because then you might be a little let down like I was. That being said, I'll get into spoilers now, so if you haven't seen this movie, turn the review off, because now I really want to get into detail about that. So obviously, it seems clear now that the monster from Cloverfield was an alien, and it was kind of cool and shocking to see that spaceship in the sky at the end of the movie, but it didn't feel like much of a reveal. It kind of felt to me like it was just like, oh, by the way, it was aliens all along, which is never a good thing. I mean, I'm trying to think of examples, but you can't really give any other examples without spoiling other movies. But you know, it's a thing other movies have done before. And that's kind of what it felt like here, which is disappointing. And I also feel like the end scene went on a little too long. I was expecting something like she escapes the bunker and then the movie ends like a minute or two afterward. Like maybe kind of a sudden ending, maybe the protagonist dies anyway. I mean, it is a sequel to Cloverfield where the protagonist dies, and it was partly written by Damien Chazelle, who's one for bittersweet endings. That was a surprise, by the way. I had no idea this was co-written by Damien Chazelle. I'm still holding out hope that there's more to the mystery that's going to be this big reveal in later movies, like the God Particle, which might be a new Cloverfield movie. Right now it's just speculation, but I'm really hoping there's gonna be more movies and more satisfying reveals. Also, like, I know this is a sequel to Cloverfield, but this movie was so much its own thing that when the ending was so dependent on having seen the first Cloverfield, I mean, you can figure out what's going on without having seen the first Cloverfield, but without having seen the first Cloverfield and knowing the world this takes place in already, it feels like a totally random ending. Like, the audience knows there's a plague or something, but when she leaves the bunker, then there's just aliens? Like, it kind of makes sense if you've seen the original Cloverfield and you know there's this big monster. And obviously you should have seen the first Cloverfield if you're watching the sequel anyway. So I guess it's not much of a valid criticism, but I just felt like it's weird how when the movie stood so much on its own until the ending, that when the ending really calls back to the first movie in tone-wise, I guess, I just thought that was a really weird move. But I loved when she found out there was an actual plague, and I loved when she found the word help scrawled on the door, and I loved when John Goodman killed that guy. I mean, it was a sad moment, but those were all great moments for the movie. This movie had lots of great moments, and it kept me excited. And John Goodman did really give a great performance. Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance was pretty good too. And now I know how people who participated in the ARG before the original Cloverfield felt when they watched the original Cloverfield and pretty much nothing tied in. But still, I'm holding out hope that they're gonna make it all better in another movie. And I was already kind of thinking that after I saw Cloverfield and they left a lot of stuff unanswered. I was hoping they might answer a little bit in 10 Cloverfield Lane, which they did, although a little uneventfully, just like when they revealed the monster in the original Cloverfield. Oh, but you know what was cool? Was when they showed the mailbox and it said 10 Cloverfield Lane. That was great. Now we finally know what Cloverfield means. That was a great reveal. Cloverfield is just like the place, I guess. No, I guess we still don't really know, but that was still a great reveal because it's showing what the title of the original movie meant. And that could have just been some stupid thing they wrote in and they didn't even plan that when they named the original movie. That could be, and it likely is the case, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they planned that, because if they did, it was a really great reveal. And so yeah, I'm hoping God Particle, which seems to be a movie about aliens, so it makes sense for a sequel, I'm hoping that's going to clear some more stuff up. And then maybe a fourth movie that will tie it all together. Now, that sounds good to me. Yeah, well, anyway, 7 out of 10. I wanted to give it a 7.5, and the ending, yeah. So, 7 out of 10. That's what I rated this movie, and tomorrow I'll see Trolls.